The medical scanner beeped 3 times, then fell silent. Dr. Vex Tal stared at the readings, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he processed what he was seeing. The human female lying on the bio table shouldn't be alive. Hell, she shouldn't even be breathing. "Commander Zolt," he called through the intercom, his voice carrying that particular tone medical officers used when they were about to deliver impossible news. "You need to see this." Commander Zolt trudged into the medical bay, his massive frame filling the doorway. The Korvaxian scales were dulled with exhaustion from 3 cycles of non-stop rescue operations. They'd pulled 17 survivors from the wreckage of the human transport vessel Wandering Star, and honestly, that was 16 more than anyone expected. "What's the damage, Doc?" Zolt asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. "This one, Doctor." Vex Tal gestured toward the human with 2 of his appendages, while the other 2 worked frantically at his medical console. Has suffered catastrophic injuries. 73% of her skeletal structure is fractured or shattered. Internal bleeding in 4 major organs. Severe cranial trauma. Burns covering 42% of her body surface. Zolt winced. He'd seen battlefield casualties that were prettier. And dose. And she's been conscious for the last 6 minutes, asking when she can get back to work. The commander's head tilted, a gesture that among his species indicated either confusion or the onset of a migraine. "Come again?" "Her name is Captain Elena Vasquez, age 34. According to her service record, she's a botanical specialist with the Human Terraforming Corp. She was leading a survey mission to catalogue the flora on Kepler 442 billion when their ship suffered a catastrophic engine failure." Dr. Vex Tal paused his work and looked directly at Commander Zolt with all 4 eyes, a sign of extreme seriousness among his people. "Sir, I've run the calculations through our best medical algorithms 6 times. This human has a 1% chance of survival. 1%. That's being generous. So why does she keep asking about her plants?" The question hung in the air like a bad smell. On the bio table, Captain Vasquez stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were brown, which shouldn't have been remarkable, except they held a determination that made both aliens unconsciously step backward. "Hey," she said, her voice raspy but surprisingly strong. "Could someone tell me what happened to my team's botanical samples? We had 3 years of research data in those specimen containers." Dr. Vex Tal exchanged glances with Commander Zolt. In 30 years of emergency medicine, he'd never had a patient with multiple organ failure ask about plant samples. "Captain Vasquez," the doctor said gently, "you need to understand your situation. Your injuries are extremely severe. We need to focus on keeping you alive." Elena tried to sit up, managed about 2 inches before her body reminded her why that was a terrible idea, and settled back down with a grunt. "Okay, point taken, but seriously, the samples." Some of those specimens were completely new to human science. "If they're gone." "Lady," Commander Zolt interrupted, his voice carrying the patience of someone who dealt with stubborn species across half the galaxy, "your spine is held together by medical nanites and sheer willpower. Your concern should be whether you'll ever walk again, not some flowers." Elena's eyes flashed with something that might have been amusement. "Flowers?" "Commander, those flowers included a carnivorous vine that can process titanium, moss that generates its own electromagnetic field, and a tree species that appears to communicate through root networks spanning continents. But sure, let's call them flowers." The sarcasm in her voice was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Dr. Vex Tal found himself reassessing his patient. Humans were known for their stubbornness, but this was approaching legendary levels. "The cargo bay where your samples were stored," Commander Zolt said slowly, took a direct hit from debris. Everything in there was vented to space. For the first time since regaining consciousness, Elena was quiet. Really quiet. The kind of quiet that made the medical equipment's beeping sound unnaturally loud. "All of it?" she finally asked. "All of it." Elena closed her eyes for exactly 10 seconds. When she opened them again, there was something different there. Something that made Dr. Vextal's medical instincts start screaming warnings. "Well," she said conversationally, "that's unfortunate." The way she said unfortunate made it sound like the understatement of the century. Commander Zolt had heard that particular tone before, usually right before someone did something spectacularly stupid and dangerous. "Captain," he said carefully, "I know this is disappointing, but—" "Disappointing?" Elena's laugh was sharp and entirely without humor. "Commander, do you know what those samples represented? They were the key to terraforming hostile worlds without destroying existing ecosystems. That research could have changed how humans colonize space forever." She paused, staring at the ceiling of the medical bay. 3 years of my life. 3 years of my team's lives. Johnson died getting those samples. Martinez lost her arm to that electromagnetic moss because she insisted on getting readings under field conditions. And now it's all just gone. Dr. Vextal was watching his patient's vital signs with growing concern. Her heart rate was climbing, but not from distress. This was something else entirely. "Ma'am, you need to stay calm," he said. "Your body can't handle stress in your current condition." Elena turned her head to look at him, and the doctor had to suppress the urge to step backward again. "Doctor, I appreciate your concern, I really do. But I think there's been a misunderstanding here." "What kind of misunderstanding?" Commander Zolt asked, though something in his gut suggested he didn't want to know the answer. "You seem to think I'm going to die from these injuries." Elena's voice was perfectly calm now, which somehow made it more terrifying than when she'd been sarcastic. "But see, here's the thing about humans that maybe your databases don't mention." Both aliens waited. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "We're really, really bad at accepting failure." Dr. Vextal checked his readings again. Her vital signs were stabilizing, which should have been impossible given her injuries. "Captain, please understand, the medical facts are clear. Your body has sustained trauma that would kill most species instantly. The fact that you're conscious at all defies every biological principle I know. Doc, you're absolutely right. This should kill me." Elena's tone was almost cheerful now. "But you know what's going to kill me faster than these injuries? Knowing that 3 years of groundbreaking research just got spaced because of a stupid engine malfunction." Commander Zolt felt a familiar sinking sensation in his primary stomach. "Captain, whatever you're thinking—" "I'm thinking," Elena interrupted, "that I need to get back to that planet." The medical bay fell silent except for the steady beeping of machines and the low hum of the ship's life support systems. Dr. Vextal's 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he processed what he'd just heard. "You want to return to Kepler 442 billion, Commander Zolt said slowly, "to restart your research." "That's correct. With a 1% survival chance. Apparently. While most of your bones are held together by medical intervention. Seems like it." Commander Zolt looked at Dr. Vextal, who was frantically checking his equipment, as if hoping the scanners had made some catastrophic error. "No such luck." "Captain," the commander said with the patience of someone explaining basic physics to a child, "even if we could get you back to the surface, which we can't because our ship is barely holding together and we're 3 days from the nearest starbase. You couldn't survive in a hostile environment for 10 minutes in your condition." Elena was quiet for a moment, considering this. "You make some excellent points, Commander. Really, your logic is flawless." Both aliens relaxed slightly. "But here's where your logic hits a snag," she continued. "You're assuming I have a choice." Dr. Vextal's medical scanner chose that moment to emit a sound he'd never heard before in 3 decades of practice. A rising tone that suggested something was happening to his patient that fell completely outside standard medical parameters. "What is that?" Commander Zolt demanded. The doctor was staring at his readings in fascination and horror. "Her body is adapting. The nanites I introduced to stabilize her spine, they're not just holding the fractures in place. They're somehow integrating with her nervous system. Elena raised an eyebrow. Is that bad? It's impossible, Dr. Vex-Tal said flatly. Biological systems don't interface with medical nanites like this. The rejection response alone should. He stopped talking as new readings appeared on his screen. Elena's broken ribs were beginning to knit together at a rate that defied every healing model in his database. The internal bleeding was clotting and stopping. Her burns were actually starting to heal. Okay, Commander Zolt said slowly, that's new. Doctor, Elena said conversationally, I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I think we need to discuss getting me back to the surface. Absolutely not, Dr. Vex-Tal replied immediately. Even with this unprecedented healing response, you're still critically injured. The atmosphere on Kepler 442 billion has elevated radiation levels, toxic plant compounds in the air, and predatory species that make a Xerian tiger look cuddly. Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut metal. Doctor, I've spent 3 years on that planet. I know exactly what's down there. The radiation signature has patterns. The toxic compounds are actually defensive mechanisms from the plants themselves. And those predatory species, half of them are herbivorous, and the other half avoid the deep forest where my research sites are located. How could you possibly know all that? Commander Zolt asked. Because unlike most survey teams, we actually talk to the planet instead of just taking readings from orbit. Elena's voice carried the pride of someone discussing a particularly clever solution to an impossible problem. That electromagnetic moss I mentioned, it doesn't just generate fields randomly. It's part of a communication network that spans the entire continent. Dr. Vex-Tal looked up from his increasingly bewildering medical readings. You're suggesting the plant life on Kepler 442 billion is sentient? I'm not suggesting anything, Doctor. I'm telling you that the planet has been trying to communicate with us since we arrived. Most survey teams miss it because they're looking for technological signatures or language patterns. But plants communicate through chemistry, electrical impulses, and network connections we're only just beginning to understand. The medical scanner emitted another impossible sound. Dr. Vex-Tal's 4 eyes went wide as he stared at the display. Commander, he said quietly, her bone density is increasing. The nanites aren't just holding her skeleton together, they're somehow enhancing it. Elena flexed her fingers experimentally. The movement should have been agony given the extent of her injuries, but she barely winced. Interesting. How much stronger? Dr. Vex-Tal consulted his readings again. Approximately 40% above baseline human norms, and climbing. Commander Zolt felt that sinking sensation in his stomach again, but this time it was accompanied by something else. Something that might have been respect, if he'd been inclined to admit it. Captain, he said carefully, even assuming we could get you back to the surface, and even assuming you somehow survive long enough to restart your research, what makes you think you can recreate 3 years of work? Elena's grin was absolutely predatory. Who says I'm going to recreate it? Both aliens stared at her. Commander, that electromagnetic moss network I mentioned. It recorded everything. Every chemical signature, every biological interaction, every piece of data we collected over 3 years. The planet itself is a living database. She paused, watching their expressions change as the implications sank in. The only problem is accessing it. The network interfaces are biological, not technological. You have to become part of the system to communicate with it properly. And that requires, she gestured vaguely at her injuries, certain modifications to standard human physiology. Dr. Vex-Tal's scanner emitted what could only be described as an alarmed beep. Captain, your nervous system is showing signs of altered electrical conductivity. The nanites are creating new neural pathways. Perfect, Elena said with satisfaction. Right on schedule. Commander Zolt's scales darkened to their deepest shade of troubled purple. On schedule for what? For going home, Commander. I'm going back to finish what we started." The way she said it left no doubt that we included her dead teammate Johnson and injured teammate Martinez. This wasn't just about scientific research anymore. This was about honoring the sacrifice of people who died believing their work mattered. "The transport shuttle is barely functional," Commander Zolt pointed out. "It might make one trip to the surface, but getting back up would be impossible." Elena's expression didn't change. "Then I guess I'll have to make it count." Dr. Vex Tal looked between his patient and his commanding officer, recognizing the expression on the human's face. He'd seen it before, in the records of human conflicts throughout their species' history. It was the look of someone who'd already made their decision and was merely waiting for the universe to catch up. "This is insane," he said quietly. Dr. Elena replied, "You gave me a 1% chance of survival. I'm already beating the odds. What's a little more insanity on top of that?" Commander Zolt studied the human female who should have been dead but was instead planning to return to a hostile alien world with nothing but determination and some very unusual medical nanites. In his 40 years of military service, he'd learned to recognize when someone had crossed the line from bravery into something else entirely. "How long do you need?" he asked. Elena's smile was radiant. "Give me 6 hours to finish healing, and I'll show you what humans mean when we say impossible is just another word for challenging." Dr. Vex Tal made a sound that might have been laughter or despair. 6 hours. To heal from injuries that should take months to recover from, assuming survival at all. "Doc, you're thinking like a conventional medical practitioner. But those nanites of yours, they're not just healing me. They're upgrading me." Elena's eyes gleamed with something that was part scientific curiosity and part pure predatory anticipation. "And when I get back down there, that planet is going to learn what happens when you mess with human research projects." The medical scanner's beeping had settled into a steady rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat, but not quite like a human heartbeat. Something new, something that hadn't existed before Elena Vasquez decided that a 1% survival chance was acceptable odds for the impossible. Outside the medical bay's viewport, the blue-green surface of Kepler 442 billion rotated slowly below them, its vast forests and electromagnetic fields creating patterns that might have been random, or might have been something else entirely, something that was about to get a very unusual visitor. 6 hours later, Dr. Vex Tal was questioning everything he'd learned in medical school. Elena Vasquez stood in the shuttle bay, stretching muscles that should have been immobilized for months. Her bones had not only healed but had developed a metallic sheen visible through her skin. The nanites had done more than repair her, they'd transformed her into something that registered on scanners as half-human, half-living machine. "Final systems check complete," Commander Zolt announced, though his voice carried the tone of someone delivering a death sentence. "The shuttle will get you to the surface, but Captain, once you're down there—" "I know." But Elena secured her pack, which contained exactly 3 items, a basic communication device, emergency rations for 2 days, and a sample collection kit she'd insisted on despite the obvious futility. "Commander, if I don't make contact within 72 hours, mark this mission as failed and move on." "And if you do make contact?" Elena's grin was sharp as broken glass. "Then you'll have front-row seats to the most interesting botanical experiment in human history." The shuttle launch was rougher than anyone expected. The little craft shook like a leaf in a hurricane as it descended through Kepler 442 billion's atmosphere, alarms screaming warnings about radiation levels and atmospheric toxicity that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. Elena watched the readings with detached interest. Fascinating. The radiation spikes correspond exactly with the electromagnetic Moss clusters I mapped 3 years ago. "Captain," the shuttle's AI announced in a voice designed to sound calming but failing miserably, "atmospheric conditions are deteriorating rapidly. Landing Zone Alpha is no longer viable due to electrical storm activity." "Switch to Landing Zone Gamma," Elena said calmly. "The one near the titanium-eating vine colonies." Captain, that area is classified as extremely hazardous. The plant life there has been observed consuming metallic objects, including survey equipment. Elena's laugh was genuinely delighted. Perfect. Set us down right in the middle of it. The shuttle touched down with a grinding crash that suggested it wouldn't be taking off again anytime soon. Elena checked her equipment one final time, then paused at the airlock door. You know, she said to the empty shuttle, Johnson always said I was too stubborn to die properly. Let's see if he was right. She opened the airlock and stepped into hell. The air hit her like a physical blow. Toxic compounds that should have seared her lungs barely registered as she breathed deeply, tasting the complex chemical signatures that had taken her team months to catalogue. The radiation that should have cooked her alive felt like warm sunlight on her enhanced skin. "Okay, Kepler," she said aloud, shouldering her pack. "Let's talk." The forest around the landing site was unlike anything in human experience. Deep trees that towered 300 meters into the purple sky, their bark pulsing with veins of bioluminescent sap. Vines thick as her waist that writhed and moved without any apparent wind. And everywhere the electromagnetic moss that painted the landscape in shifting patterns of blue and silver light. Elena had taken perhaps 50 steps from the shuttle when the first attack came. A vine, easily 12 meters long and covered in thorns that gleamed like polished metal, whipped toward her with striking snake speed. She didn't dodge. Instead, she caught it. The vine's thorns, designed to penetrate the hardest wood and stone, skittered harmlessly off her enhanced skin. The plant's crushing strength, evolved to break the bones of large predators, met the resistance of her nanite-reinforced skeleton and failed utterly. "Well, hello there," Elena said conversationally to the struggling vine. "You're new. I don't remember cataloguing anything quite like you." The vine thrashed for a moment longer, then went completely still. Elena could feel something happening, a tingling sensation where the plant touched her skin. The nanites in her system were responding to something, creating connections she couldn't yet understand. Then, impossibly, she heard it speak. Not words, not sounds, but direct communication. Chemical signals translated into meaning by her enhanced nervous system. An unknown entity. Metallic biological hybrid. Query, purpose. Elena's eyes went wide. The electromagnetic network wasn't just recording data, it was actively intelligent. The entire forest was a single vast consciousness. "My purpose," she said aloud, knowing somehow that the plant could understand her words through chemical translation, "is to complete the research my team died for. To understand how your ecosystem works, so that humans can coexist with worlds like this instead of destroying them. Previous humans, destructive, took samples without permission, disrupted growth patterns. Why should this human be different?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Elena felt the weight of 3 years of mistakes, of approaching this world like conquerors instead of guests. "Because," she said quietly, "this time I'm not taking anything. I'm offering something instead." Query, what does the hybrid human offer? Elena took a deep breath, tasting the complex atmosphere of a world that should have killed her a dozen times over. Knowledge about other worlds, other ecosystems, other ways of life, and something else. She reached into her pack and withdrew the sample collection kit, then deliberately smashed it against a nearby rock. The sterile containers shattered, their contents scattering to the wind. "I offer partnership instead of exploitation." The forest went completely silent. Even the constant background hum of electromagnetic activity faded to nothing. Elena waited, knowing she'd just gambled her life on a world's judgment of human intentions. Then the moss beneath her feet began to glow. Light raced outward from where she stood, traveling through root networks and electromagnetic conduits faster than she could follow. In seconds, the entire visible forest was blazing with patterns of communication that painted the landscape in cascades of blue and silver fire. Accepted came the response, and Elena realized it wasn't coming from the vine anymore. It was coming from everywhere at once. The trees, the moss, the very soil beneath her feet. The hybrid human may proceed. Warning, integration process will be intensive. Integration? Elena asked, but she was already beginning to understand. The nanites in her system weren't just healing her or enhancing her. They were preparing her for something much more significant. Roots began emerging from the ground around her feet, not attacking but reaching toward her with obvious intent. Elena didn't move as they wound around her legs, her arms, making contact with her skin at dozens of points. The sensation was indescribable. Information flooded her enhanced nervous system at a rate that would have killed a normal human. 3 years of research data, yes, but so much more. The complete biological history of an entire world, stretching back millions of years. The rise and fall of species, the complex dance of evolution and adaptation, the gradual development of planetary consciousness. And something else. Something that made her laugh out loud despite the overwhelming flood of data. "You magnificent bastards," she whispered. "You've been waiting for us." Explanation required. The electromagnetic signatures, the chemical communications, the way your ecosystem adapted to our presence instead of simply rejecting us. You weren't just recording our research. You were studying us, learning about humans so you could figure out how to work with us. Correct. Humanity represents potential. Dangerous, but promising. Your species spreads rapidly across space, but unlike previous expansion species encountered, humans demonstrate capacity for symbiosis. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as the full scope of the revelation hit her. Other species have been here before. Any species. Most sought to consume or control. All failed. Planetary defenses are comprehensive. Images flashed through her mind. Ships falling from the sky, their technology failing as electromagnetic pulses scrambled their systems. Ground forces consumed by aggressive plant growth. Entire civilizations ground down by patient, inexorable biological warfare. But you didn't attack us. Humans demonstrated unusual behavior. Took samples but also gave gifts. Studied ecosystem patterns but also protected vulnerable species from your own activities. Showed grief when team members died. Unprecedented. Elena remembered Johnson's funeral, how her team had honored him by planting a tree from Earth near their research station. It had seemed like a small gesture at the time. You kept the tree alive, she realized. Enhanced it. Integrated it with local root network. It continues to grow. As do the other gifts your species has unknowingly provided. The flow of information continued, but now Elena was beginning to process it differently. The nanites in her system weren't just receiving data, they were becoming part of the network itself. She could feel her consciousness expanding, connecting not just to this forest but to similar networks across the planet, and beyond. Query, are you prepared for the final phase? Elena understood what was being asked. The integration wasn't just about accessing the planet's database. It was about becoming a permanent liaison between humanity and a form of intelligence that spanned worlds. Because this wasn't just happening on Kepler 442 billion. There are others, she said. It wasn't a question. 17 worlds, all connected through quantum-entangled biological networks. All part of the same distributed consciousness, all waiting for species capable of true partnership. The scope of it was staggering. Not just one intelligent planet, but an entire galactic community of worlds that had been watching and waiting for species that could move beyond conquest and consumption. And if I say yes, if I complete the integration, you become the first human member of the network. Your species gains access to biological technologies beyond current imagination. Terraforming becomes partnership instead of domination. The galaxy opens to human expansion, but as collaborators rather than conquerors. Elena thought about Dr. Vextal's 1% survival odds, about Commander Zolt's certainty that returning to the surface was suicide, about Johnson and Martinez, and 3 years of research that was supposed to be lost forever. And if I say no, You return to your ship with complete research data and enough biological samples to advance human terraforming by centuries. The network waits for another potential liaison. Humanity continues its current expansion pattern. It would have been so easy to take the safe option, to return with the data and the samples and be hailed as a hero for salvaging something from disaster. She'd have a distinguished career, recognition from the scientific community, a comfortable life. But Elena had never been interested in the easy option. "I have one condition," she said. "State condition. My people need to know what they're getting into. No hidden manipulation, no secret tests. If humanity is going to be part of this network, it has to be a conscious choice. Acceptable. Integration will include communication protocols for human governmental and scientific authorities. Full disclosure will be provided." Elena took a deep breath of toxic air that tasted like home. "Then yes, let's make history." The final integration was like dying and being reborn simultaneously. Her consciousness expanded across root networks and electromagnetic fields until she could sense the pulse of life across an entire continent. She felt the slow thoughts of mountains, the quick, bright intelligence of the titanium-eating vines, the vast, deep wisdom of trees that had been growing for 1,000 years. And through quantum connections she couldn't fully understand, she touched the minds of similar networks on 16 other worlds. Each unique, each adapted to different environments and challenges, but all part of something larger than the sum of their parts. When her awareness finally settled back into something resembling her original self, Elena was no longer entirely human. Her skin had developed the same bioluminescent patterns as the moss around her. Her eyes now registered electromagnetic spectra that no human eye had ever seen. And in her mind she carried the collective knowledge of worlds. The communication device in her pack crackled to life. "Captain Vasquez, this is Commander Zolt. Please respond. It's been 71 hours since your last transmission." Elena smiled, feeling the forest's amusement echoing her own. "Commander, this is Captain Vasquez. Mission status has changed significantly. Captain, thank the void you're alive. What's your condition? Do you need immediate extraction?" "Negative on the extraction, Commander. But I'm going to need you to patch me through to human high command. All channels, maximum priority." There was a long pause. "Captain, you're in no condition to be making command decisions. Your medical readings are, they're not registering as human anymore." Elena looked down at her hands, watching patterns of light pulse beneath her skin in rhythm with the forest around her. "Commander, I've never been more human in my life. And I've got a message that's going to change everything." She stood in the center of an alien forest that had become her home, connected to a network of worlds that spanned the galaxy, carrying the hopes and knowledge of both her species and another. The 1% survival odds hadn't killed her. They'd turned her into something legend. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez, Human Terraforming Corps, calling all human territories. I'm transmitting from Kepler 442 billion with a message from some new friends who'd like to have a conversation about the future of human expansion." She paused, feeling the vast intelligence of the network listening through her, ready to speak to humanity for the first time. "Trust me, you're going to want to hear this." Above her, through the canopy of impossible trees, she could see the lights of Commander Zolt's ship. Soon it would carry her message to the rest of human space. Soon everything would change. Elena had come to this world to complete her research. Instead, she'd become something new entirely. A bridge between species, a translator for intelligences vast and patient and ancient. The forest around her pulsed with patterns of light that might have been laughter, or approval, or both. After all, they'd given her a 1% chance of survival. She'd turned it into a 100% chance of revolution.